Assalamu alaikum. In the previous lesson, we studied coordinators, which are used to make compound sentences. In today's lesson, we're going to study subordinators. The reason why subordinators are important is that they are used to make complex sentences. As we have established before, if you're trying to get a score of 7 or higher in the writing part of the IELTS exam, you have to know how to make complex sentences. So let's take a look at them. Okay. Let's look at subordinated conjunctions or subordinators. We usually use them to create complex sentences, as we said before. And we do that by joining one independent clause plus a dependent clause, like the example here. Mustafa is not allowed into the class anymore. This is an independent clause. It doesn't require any further explanation. But look at this one. Because he doesn't wear protective masks. So this is a dependent clause. It cannot stand alone. It needs another clause to explain it. You can simply join them together. Mustafa is not allowed into the classroom anymore because he doesn't wear protective masks. And now you have a complex sentence. So this is a complex sentence because it has one dependent clause plus one independent clause. You have a subordinator in the middle. So it's actually a complex sentence, as we said before. Okay, now let's talk about the difference between coordinators and subordinators. We studied coordinators in the previous video, and in this video we're focused on subordinators. So let's try to understand the differences between them. Subordinators can be used at the beginning of the sentence, whereas coordinators can't. So if you look at this example, because Mustafa doesn't wear protective masks, he's not allowed into the classroom anymore. You can have the subordinator at the beginning of the sentence, the beginning of the two clauses like that, one clause right here, one clause like right there, but you can't do this with a coordinator. You can't do this with and, but, or, nor, so, or yet. One more difference. In informal English, it's acceptable to write like this. If you use an informal English, Mustafa is sick, period. So with a capital letter, comma, he decided to skip class. This is acceptable in informal English. Of course, if you use formal English, you shouldn't do that. You should use so in the way I taught you. You're going to use a comma before it and a small letter, and then you continue the sentence. However, it's not acceptable even in informal English to write like this. Mustafa decided to skip class, period, because he's sick. That's not acceptable, not even in the informal English. Nope. This means that you can't use a subordinator with one clause. You can't have a subordinator with one clause. You can't. But you may use a coordinator with one clause like this example right here. And again, this is used in informal English. Here is another difference between coordinators and subordinators. You can join the two clauses with a subordinator placed at the beginning of the first one, but you can never do the same with a coordinator. We said that before. Look at that. Because Mustafa is sick, he decided to skip class. So we're joining the two clauses. This is the first one, and that's the second one with the subordinator right here. But you can't do this with a coordinator. You can't say, so Mustafa is sick, he decided to skip class. Never acceptable, not in any way, not even in informal English or anything like that. Let's look at another difference, and this one is important. It's related to commas. When a coordinator is used between the two clauses, it requires a comma. On the other hand, you don't use a comma when subordinators are used between two clauses. Let me explain this. Look at that. You will get a high score in the exam if you study hard. So look at that if. Now that's a subordinator. You don't use a comma here. You don't do that. But look at this one. You studied hard, so I expect, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. So I expect you will get a high score in the exam. So in this situation, you have to use a comma. Can you see that? So when you have subordinators, no commas, but when you have coordinators, use commas. Okay. And now we're going to talk about the difference between, we're going to talk about the different types of subordinators. So subordinators are divided into groups according to the meaning. The first group is related to contrast, like the word while, cause, like the word because, effect or result, like the words so that or in order to, condition, like if or unless, time, like before or after, Let's look at these different types in details and understand how to use them in the sentence. Let's look at the first one, contrast, while. The word while can have two meanings. The first meaning is related to time, but the second meaning is related to contrast. So the first meaning indicates two things that are happening at the same time. Like when you say, while my parents were away for the weekend, I decided to throw a house party. So they were away, and at the same time, I threw a house party. Another example, I often get distracted while I'm trying to study. But the word while can also be used to switch from one idea to another idea to indicate the two ideas are opposite to each other. While puppies are cute, they can be incredibly annoying to take care of. So they are cute, but on the other hand, they are annoying. This is not the same meaning as the previous one. Here, we're not talking about two things happening at the same time. We're talking about two contrasting ideas. Let's take another example. Neutral colors tend to go together easily, while other colors are harder to pair up well. So again, two contrasting ideas. Pay attention to the fact that if you use while to talk about two things happening at the same time, you don't use a comma if it comes in the middle. You don't do that. But if you use while to talk about two contrasting ideas and you use it in the middle, you do use a comma. And while is the only subordinator that requires the use of a comma in the middle of the sentence like that. It's the only subordinator. As we said, as we said before, if you have a subordinator and you use it in the middle of the sentence, you don't use a comma. But the only exception to this rule is the word while that requires the use of a comma only if it means two contrasting ideas. Let's move on. Okay, the word although. After although, make sure that you use a clause, and a clause means a subject and a verb. Although the party was dull, I was still happy to see you. So the party was dull. Subject and verb. But if you use despite, you're going to use it in a different way. Use a gerund. A gerund means a verb plus ing or a noun after it. Despite the dull party, I was still happy to see you. So you don't have a verb. There's no verb here. Okay. You may also use in spite of. And in spite of has the same meaning as despite. And it's used in the same way. We also use a gerund or a noun. In spite of the dull party, I was still happy to see you. Pay attention to the importance of using of after in spite. So despite doesn't require the use of a preposition. On the other hand, in spite requires the use of the preposition of. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about cause. Now, you may use since. The word since can be used to introduce a cause or a reason. I decided to bake cupcakes since it was Marjorie's birthday. Since you're always late, I am going to start showing up late too. In this situation, the word since means because. It can also be used to indicate that something has been true starting from a certain point in time. I've been broke since my last vacation to Puerto Rico. So that's a different meaning here. Since here means because, but since here doesn't mean because. It means starting from this point in time. Ever since I was young, I have always wanted to become a scientist. Now let's look at because, how to use it. Because. We can use the word because to introduce a cause or a reason. I'm not going to apologize just because you told me to. So after because, make sure that you use a subject and a verb, a clause. Here's one more example. Because my lower back kept hurting, I decided to finally go see a chiropractor. Subject and a verb. But if you use because of, you have to use a gerund or a noun. One more time, a gerund is a verb plus ing, like the example. Because of the pain in my lower back, I decided to finally see a chiropractor. Look at that. You don't have a clause. You don't have a verb. There's no verb. Because of the pain in my lower back, I decided to finally see a chiropractor. The third group of subordinators is related to effect and result. Like so that. I took some pictures of my vacation so that you could see. So the reason why I took the pictures is for you to see this is the result of my action. If you see an ambulance behind you, always pull over so that it can get through. Remember that so that cannot be used in the beginning of the sentence. You cannot start a sentence with it. We said in the beginning of this video that you may use subordinators at the beginning of the sentence to join the two clauses together, but there are some exceptions. So that is one of these exceptions. Okay. And then we have in that, I'm sorry, here, we have in that. It means the reason is that I was extremely lucky in that the police decided not to check my belongings. So the reason why I was lucky is that the police decided not, or the way I was lucky is that the police decided not to check my belongings. The house was beautiful in that it really caught the eye, yet with a minimalist design. So the way it was beautiful, it caught the eye. Remember that you cannot use in that in the beginning. Now that, this one you can use it in the beginning or in the middle, no problems. Now that I am 18, I can finally vote in my first election because I'm 18. I can think of it a bit clearer now that I have had my coffee. We should think about going to the park now that the weather is a bit nicer. Okay, in order to or in order for, it can be used in the beginning or in the middle. Look at this example. In order to solve the problem of obesity, the government needs to control the distribution of junk food. Okay, you can also use in order for. In order for the government to solve the problem of obesity, it needs to control the distribution of junk food. So after in order for, you need to use the subject. But after in order to, you just start with the verb. So you have a verb here, but you have a subject there. Okay, next one. Condition, if. And you really need to review the different rules of if, like the first conditional, the second conditional, the third conditional, and the zero conditional. They are so important. I am not going to review them here in this video because I don't want it to be too long. And the focus of this video is the use of subordinators. Generally speaking, if is one of those subordinators. But you should do that. You should consult any grammar book and do some exercises related to these conditions. We have some examples here. If I lived alone, I'd be blasting my music 24/7. I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. We can also use the word even with if. I wouldn't tell you his secret even if you begged me. Even if I'm having a bad day, I try to be nice to people. Whether. Whether has the same meaning as if. I'm not sure whether we'll be able to carry out the whole plan. I'm not sure if we'll be able to carry out the whole plan. So in this situation, whether means if exactly. We can also say whether or not. Whether he comes or not doesn't really matter. We have the word in case, also is very close in meaning to if. I send the message twice in case the first one didn't go through. In the condition that the first one didn't go through, I sent it twice. In case you're wondering, the performance doesn't end for another 2 hours. This one literally means if. If you're wondering, the performance doesn't end for another 2 hours. So you might use in case, like if you're writing an essay and you feel that you've repeated the word if many times, you can exchange it with the word in case in some situations. Let's move to unless, and unless means if not. The professor said not to email her unless you have an important question. So the only situation in which you are allowed to email the professor is if you have an important question. I personally won't date you unless I find you attractive. This is the only condition. Unless the government changes its strategy, the future remains uncertain for this issue. So unless means if not. Provided that, it means as long as, or if, the manager will give you a day of work, provided that you give a valid reason for it. So the one condition in which the manager will give you a day off is that you give a valid reason for it. Can also mean you can replace it with if. The manager will give you a day off work if you give a valid reason for it. Provided that you work hard and participate all semesters, the professor might improve your grade. So if you work hard, the professor might improve your grade. Finally, you have the time subordinators, like until. I usually sit around in my office until my boss gives me work to do. Until you come into my life, I wasn't quite sure. I'm sorry, until you came into my life, I wasn't quite sure where I would find love. Remember to use a present tense after until, even if you're talking about the future. Like, look at this example. I usually sit around in my office until my boss gives me work to do. In this situation, I'm trying to say until he comes in the future and gives me work to do. But we have to use the present, even if we're talking about the future. This is one of the rules. Once means immediately after. As soon as also means immediately after. Once I actually started going to museums, I realized that I really liked them. Immediately after I started going to museums, I realized that I liked them. I started to seriously rethink my life once I graduated, after I graduated. As soon as you're all packed, after you're all packed, we'll put everything in the car. Can you let me know as soon as you're done with the assignment, after you're done with the assignment? Okay, now let's practice. If you do some exercises, you should be able to understand these subordinators in a better way. Look at the 4 sentences here. All you have to do is to choose the correct subordinator. I'll give you a few seconds to think. If you need more time, you can pause, but I'm going to show you the answers right now. Look at that. So in the first situation, after the basement flooded, we spent all day cleaning up after. I don't want to go to the movies because I hate the smell of popcorn. Until the spring arrives, we have to be prepared for more snow. Until. You won't pass the test unless you study. Okay, let's take another exercise. This one is more challenging and I think it's also more useful. Some of these sentences have mistakes. You need to correct them. I'll give you some time to look at the sentences from 1 to 5. Okay, time for me to show you the answers right now. And if you need more time, of course you do. You should pause the video and take more time to look at the sentences and try to identify the mistakes. Okay. Even if I will lend you some money, it will not be enough. If you review if, you will remember that we don't use the future after if. We use the future in the second clause, not in the first one. So this has to be removed like this. And you have to use the present. Even if I lend you some money, it will not be enough. Okay, here's this one. Although Mohamed Salah scored a few goals in the African Championship, but he's considered one of the greatest players in the world. What's the problem here? I'll tell you what the problem is. You have 2 connectors in the same sentence. This is not acceptable. You can't have 2 connectors in the same sentence. This is not acceptable by all means. So if you look at that, although Mohamed Salah and then but, no, one of them has to be removed. And you can actually remove any one of them. You can remove this one, for example. You can remove although. Sorry, just a second. Mohamed Salah scored a few goals in the African Championship, but he's considered one of the greatest players. Or you can remove but and keep although. Although Mohamed Salah scored a few goals in the African Championship, he's considered one of the greatest players in the world. But you can't have both of them at the same time. Number 3, the government increased the prices even though the economy is in a very bad condition. The mistake is related to the comma here. As we said before, when you have a subordinator in the middle of the sentence between the 2 clauses, you can't use a comma before it. The only exception is the word while if it means 2 contrasting ideas. So the comma needs to be removed. And now the sentence is grammatically correct. Look at number 4. Because the high rate of unemployment in Egypt, many Egyptians try to find work abroad. There is a problem here. We said before that if you use because, you have to have a subject and a verb, a complete clause. But you don't have a subject and a verb here. The high rate of unemployment in Egypt, there's no verb. So you can fix the sentence by one of 2 ways. Either you add a verb or you change because into because of doesn't require the use of a verb. So if you say because of the high rate of unemployment in Egypt, many Egyptians try to find work abroad, the sentence becomes grammatically correct without any mistakes. Look at number 5. In order that anyone to lose weight, exercise, and a healthy diet are essential. You have a subject here. So you can't use in order that. That doesn't make sense. It has to be in order for. Now is grammatically correct. Let's continue practicing because this is useful. We have 5 more sentences. I'd like you to look at them and also correct any possible grammatical mistakes. I will show you the answers right now, but you need to pause the video, please. Athletes get paid millions, although they don't provide a significant contribution to the society. So what's the problem here? I'll tell you what the problem. You can't have a subordinator like that at the beginning of a clause and in the middle between 2 clauses and start a sentence with it. This is wrong. So you have to remove this, right? And you just put the word although like this, and now the sentence becomes grammatically correct. Although, so it goes like this. Athletes get paid millions, although they don't provide a significant contribution to the society. Number 7, despite they work hard, doctors don't get decent salaries. There's a mistake here. There's a mistake in this part. As we said in today's video that you can't have a complete clause after despite. You can't have a subject and a verb. So there are 2 ways. There are many ways actually to correct the sentence. One of them is to remove despite and add although, because although can come before a clause. Okay, what if I want to use despite? So you need to remove the verb and make it a noun. So despite their hard work, doctors don't get decent salaries. Now the sentence is grammatically correct. Look at that. Look at this one. So that they win championships, athletes have to exercise regularly. As we said in this video that you can't start with so that. You cannot do that. It can come in the middle, but not at the beginning. So how can you fix it? In a very simple way. You can just put this clause at the beginning, athletes. Yeah, I'm just going to put it at the beginning like that. And of course, I have to start with a capital letter. Athletes have to exercise regularly, but then again, I have to remove the capital letter from here. So that they win championships. Now the sentence is grammatically correct. Look at that. Athletes have to exercise regularly so that they win championships. Number 9. Some people think that immigration has a lot of negative consequences, while others believe that it's, I'm sorry, I'm going to fix this. While others believe that it's important to travel and explore the world. Again, you can't have a subordinator like that. It cannot come between the 2 clauses and to be separated with a period like this. So you have to remove the period, right? And then remove the capital letter. And then now is grammatically correct. But we need to ask ourselves a question. Should we have a comma here? As we said before, the rule is if while indicates 2 contrasting ideas, then we need to use a comma. But if while indicates 2 actions happening at the same time, then we don't need to use a comma. In this situation, it's actually 2 contrasting ideas, so we have to have a comma. Finally, despite their identical genetic composition, many twins grow up having different personalities. Look at this sentence one more time. Despite their identical genetic composition, many twins grow up having different personalities. No mistakes in this sentence. It's a grammatically correct sentence without any mistakes. You have despite, and then you have a clause that doesn't have a verb. There is no verb here, so we don't need to make any changes. And then in the second part, you have a complete clause. Many twins grow up having different personalities, so there are no mistakes. This is actually a trick question. Okay, I hope today's lesson was useful. We studied how to use subordinators, which are used to make complex sentences. Please, if you have any questions, you need to write to me, and I'm gonna gladly answer any questions or any problems that you might have. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm gonna see you in the next video, inshallah.